19 to 92. The Gerry Ryan Show, Monday to Friday, 9 till 12 on 2FM.
Undercover police surveillance is part of law enforcement, a very serious and important part of law enforcement that we usually see through the lens of a Hollywood movie. Of course, the reality of the job may not always mirror the silver screen, but then secrecy is the key in more ways than one. A man who can shed just enough light on the situation not to give the game away is former RUC officer Paddy Craig. Now, that's not Paddy's real name, but for the purposes of the interview and indeed the book, that's the name that he's using. Based in Northern Ireland, he's worked undercover throughout Ireland, the UK and continental Europe. And his new book, Undercover Cop, has just been published by Gill and Macmillan. Paddy, good morning and welcome to the studio.
Good morning.
First of all, why did you decide to write the book? Because it's like having a red flag over you saying, shoot me now, isn't it?
Well, some would say I've been covered that flag for some years, but it was really after or just as I was retiring. A lot of my friends, and I wasn't allowed to speak about my work, and didn't speak to my work about which was now my ex-wife or my family or anyone, including my best friends, and I just used to disappear for months at an end. And they thought I was clubbing it throughout Europe because every time they rang me, maybe late at night, they could hear the background music. Thought I was partying, but I was far from it. And they said to me, what really did you do, Paddy? When you were away, what did you do? And this is when I was off the job. I took early retirement, and I told them, and they just, friends and sort of colleagues alike, just stared at me and, more or less said I was taking the mickey. I said, no, that's what I really did.
That's my job.
And somebody said, did you write that down? And so I sort of played with the idea. It took me some time, and I wrote a few chapters out, or paragraphs even, and Gill and Macmillan heard about it through a journalist friend I've just met, I've known over the years, for 20 years, and they rang me up and said, I believe you're writing a book, can we have a wee look at that, what you've written? So it just went from there, and then I was... they signed me up.
Now, if you were a former SAS serviceman, or if you were in MI5 or MI6, you wouldn't be allowed to do this legally. How are you able to do it legally?
Well, I think they all have legally. I mean, look at McNabb's books, and
I know, but he wouldn't be able to write that book now and publish it.
Well, I mean, I think it all depends what you're. I mean, I'm most of my work. I mean, I have steered away. Anyone who reads my book, I mean, it's not because I've put in enough to make it interesting, but I'm not stupid. I mean, I've worked with the law enforcement throughout the world, and I'm not going to make criminals' jobs. That's not to tell criminals, what to do and what not to do. 90% of the book is open to not only verification, if you want to put it like that, or the veracity of, if you went on to Google, you'll be able to, because the cases, 90% of the cases have already been through the courts and are well documented. It's just that they didn't know who I was.
So you didn't get a phone call from Whitehall, I think.
Well, Whitehall don't know.
I'm worried about this book you're writing.
Well, to put it in the Irish, and I know we're live, there is a lot of people pissed about it.
I'll bet.
There have been steps in the north to stimify the book. I don't really want to go into that because some of those have been are ongoing.
Okay, right. Well,
now,
as I suspect,
not legally, but not legally. Dirty Tricks, the Dirty Tricks department. Yeah. But then I was never a part of the Dirty Tricks department. Although I was never part of the special branch or the British security industry, MI5 and like that. We worked outside. We worked within the criminal investigation end of it.
Now, you left school at 15. I think you did an apprenticeship as
electrician.
An electrician. And this would have been slap bang in the middle of the Troubles in the 70s. Actually, it was when I was leaving school myself. And then you decided to join the UDR and became a member of C Company in the 10th Battalion.
That's right, yeah.
And you did that for what reason?
I was going to say because everybody else was doing it. No, well, really because I suppose, I mean, I was young then, and I saw it. You're right. I mean, this is the very height of the terrorist troubles.
Oh yeah.
And it was a localised, really, the military, and it had an appeal to me, which I always wanted to join the police, but then I wasn't that age. I struggled to get into the police in any event. I left school when I was 15. I had no qualifications whatsoever. And I was struggling. I got into it was part-time UDR, and then as soon as I could, I joined the reserve, and the police reserve. Again, in the same area where I've been brought up, in the Ardoyne area, which was a rough working class area, but it was a good area, you know. It was an area prior to the Troubles, which everyone had really got on. The only thing everybody had, regardless of what colour, shade or religion you were, was that most of us were working class and hadn't got all that much money, you know. And maybe that's why we kept together, you know.
Now, of course, not for you, the uniform and the beat and community policing. You seem to get sucked into surveillance work and detective work quite quickly.
Yeah, well, I had my visions, like in most things in life, my visions when I joined the police was, I had visions of me driving around as you do, and I suppose anybody joining the guards, driving around these lovely cars the guards have and what have you, and those were quickly shattered for me because I was immediately attached to the British Army. On army liaison duty, and that meant really walking the streets of West Belfast, getting stoned and pricked at that time.
An instant moving target.
Exactly, because the police had, for one reason or were not well liked, and the fact they were actually starting to move back into what they would have called nationalist areas. Mm-hmm. And it was rough in more ways than one, but it was a good grounding for me. And I got to know everybody, and I very quickly got brought into the CID. Because of my success rates, really. And I got into the CID, and then I was, I just more or less stayed with that with a few jumps in and out of uniform. And it wasn't, not jumping, but into the surveillance end of it, it wasn't until over halfway through my career when really through an attempt in my life, and that on my family, in which I had to leave home overnight. Under armed guard, I was more or less put out the grass. I was walking around the place kicking the bin, looking something to do, and I zeroed in on this, what I seen as something I could work at, and I became involved in it. And of course, right from the word go, as with the internal politics in the police, was I was really a target for Special Branch, who saw me as an enemy of moving. They still do in the north. Well, in the north, they control anything to do with surveillance. The security establishment. It's or the Securocrats, as Gerry Adams calls them. It's a very good name. He made it up, but it's a very good name, and I think it covers them all. The Securocrats, who control anything to do with surveillance in the north. And if the CID, they didn't give us any money, they didn't give us any equipment, and that's how I got actually into the surveillance, because I found this unit that every time I walked into the room, they were playing cards. And they weren't playing cards, and these were very highly policemen and women, very highly paid, and all they did was play cards, beanie, or go to the gym. And I watched this for weeks, and I couldn't understand, because everybody else was up there nagging blood and sweat outside. And I found out that there was a CID unit, but the Special Branch wouldn't let them go out. There was a CID surveillance unit, but Special Branch only let them go out and stupid things, and they had no equipment and all this. And so I lobbied and eventually got control of that. That's what started it. And there would started then a 10 or 15 year fight with Special Branch, because every day I went out and fought with them, because they had a different agenda. I wanted to lock people up, they didn't. Well, they would dispute that, but that's my opinion.
And what kind of work did you find yourself doing then?
Well, once I started, it was really through, I must have to say, friends in Scotland Yard. I made personal friends, really because I got no help within the Securocrats from the RUC. I was sent by a few senior officers in the RUC told me to go and train myself, really. So I made contact with a few good contacts in England and with Scotland Yard, and I found out that there was a whole training establishment out there which could be tapped into. And I did all these courses and all these specialist courses in surveillance and things like that there. And what I wanted to do was, I was the first RUC person to have done it, and the branch didn't like that either, because they were all in-house trained by MI5 and that. I was trained the same as any other English officer. And I was certified by the Home Office, which nobody liked. And so through my contacts in Scotland Yard, cut a long story short, I found out about these specialist undercover courses. And really through my contacts, I got really onto those courses and went into then a dark world of really overnight of operating undercover. And
on your own, or
no, there was
units with the CID.
There was very few of us. There was only really at the end maybe only 4 of us, but we only either operated alone or 2 of us. And they say Scotland Yard or some of the English forces or any force, the Guardian would say, we're involved in an operation. We need people who have got contacts as gangsters and whatever, in the underworld. That's the way it worked. Sometimes we would ring England and use a couple of them to come over and do a job for us, or part of a job, and the way they.
And were you in the business of tracking down fellas who'd committed crime, or were you in the business primarily of trying to stop?
Well, the name
I presume primarily paramilitary activity, though you did develop, if not an obsession, certainly a passionate interest in things like drug trafficking.
Yeah, well, behind the paramilitaries are never far away. Though in fairness, I don't really like. I'm not a fan of the IRA, but in fairness, the IRA were one of the perhaps the paramilitaries who were least involved. The paramilitaries would have been some of the loudest paramilitaries, the LVF, the INLA, those type of Republican type, if you want to put it. Those were the type quasi-criminals into bank robberies, drugs, trafficking. We would run across those people. We wouldn't really put labels on them, but we would be targeting drug dealers. And the whole undercover world and the law in relation to undercover work is that the crime had to be what's called led on, i.e. it had to be, in a layman's term, the crime had to be in motion. And we couldn't counsel, incite or procure the commission of a crime. And I don't mean that in a very laudable way, but there's no point in it, because when I went to court, it was to be thrown out the first hurdle legally.
So you had to use your training, your contacts, your skills, your intuition to figure out who was doing it, when they were doing it, and then what did you do?
Well, there was a great empire behind us, really. I mean, there was hundreds, perhaps, of different officers, some of whom who had already infiltrated these gangs. We would have been brought in as money men, heavy men, driving lorries, different branches, to infiltrate the gang. Sometimes, these things weren't done overnight. We would have had to work at them for months, sometimes a year. Abroad, it wasn't always done inside the UK or within the 26
countries. So this
countries.
is adopting a personality, lying, giving a false name, creating a character, a profile for yourself, genning yourself up on what's required here and the kind of things that these fellas want to hear and not hear. So you become a different person.
Well, I had 2 identities. I had a third one, and that was my escape route. But I had 2 identities. One was a sort of loyalist gangster type paramilitary. You never put yourself really off as a paramilitary. You always put yourself as a person with paramilitary connections. Yeah. And the other one, that was Billy Craig, and the other one was Sean Murphy. He was a Republican gangster with a Republican. Now, I was born and reared in working class Belfast areas, and I can jump from one area to another. I've always run around with, sort of man says, in the north both sides. So I was as home in the Falls as I was in the Shankill. So when people talked about bars, I was sitting in the bar. And you just take on identity, but it's a dangerous end because you...
And did these guys not look for verification of who you were? I mean, how careful were they?
Some of them went to extreme lengths, but we had spent a lot of time in our backup legends as... we had people, that's what I'm saying, behind every operation there just wasn't, there were people, some of them, you might say, just ordinary men, 5/8 in the street, businessmen who would have backed us up. I name one on the book, a publican, well-known, who's a friend of mine, and his staff and him backed us up, and in fact took part in some of our operations. And in one case, we ran a scam in the pub, and he sang Danny Boy to one of the top criminals in the UK, and who sang. His rendition of Danny Boy went down so well that this guy was crying. And we were crying too, with laughter, really internally, that the scam had really went so well. You talk about the sting, that's when you really take... Bear in mind that, we were dealing with people who were the most evil people. There's a Stockholm syndrome where you really get to like these people. It never really happened with me. Sometimes I was sorry because of their children.
Well, then, in fact, in the book you describe one particular criminal, a fairly serious, big, massive human being, and you describe him. He's holding his child in his arms, and she's pale and drawn, and she's just come from chemotherapy, and you know that your ambition and your intent is to take her father away from her. And did you ever get sentimental about things like that?
No, that's one of the only times that I ever got. I have a young daughter, and this child was beautiful. She was like an angel. And well, I hope God forgives me. Her father was an animal, absolute animal of a man. And the wee girl was beautiful, and I knew I was going to put him away, and I have done for a very, very long time. And I was part, well, I keep using the word but I was part of the group of police officers in operation that took away over £50 million from him. The Assets Bureau took over £50 million from this guy, and, that hurts, and so... But I mean, it passed because that's life. You can't. I felt
if the movie version of that story would be that you went round the next week and you handed over money to the mother and you said, "Look, here's my number. Ring if you ever need any help." Did you do anything like that?
No.
That's the movie.
No, yeah, well, the movie, the reality is more like a movie because this guy lived in a fortress with electric gates. Rottweilers with sliced ears, and when we drove actually into his drive that night for the meet, we couldn't get out of the cars because of the dogs slobbering against the windows, the attack dogs, and I was twitching that night because I knew my backup was half a mile away, and I had to scale this house like a fortress to get to me, and this guy's in behind electric gates. He's a multi-millionaire.
And what was he? What did he do? What was his business?
Well, he would have put himself off as scrap man, builder, he was a full-time criminal. He had amassed an absolute fortune, millions and millions of pounds through criminal conduct, cigarettes, drugs.
Diesel.
Yeah, well, no, more drugs and cigarettes. Though he would have had the diesel's really an Irish thing, you see. And it's really a Republican scam, really. So I know the rest of the criminals found it very, very hard to get into. Though a lot of them have tried. We're trying to get the formula. But the Irish kept that to themselves. But evil people like that and the people who deal with drugs, I've just seen... I go down to Dublin quite a lot, and I've been down to Dublin 2 or 3 times a month. And within the last 3 weeks, in a very nice... At Connolly, in broad daylight, I saw a guy shooting up.
Yeah.
In broad daylight. And in a very salubrious hotel, I don't want to mention the hotel because it's not the hotel's fault, in a very salubrious hotel in Dublin here within the last 3 weeks, I walked out for a smoke because everybody's a leper now, smokes inside the place. I went out for a smoke and there's a guy shooting up at the front door. And people say, "Oh, well, get the police. The police is too late. That guy, it's not the guy, that guy's real, that guy's life."
Well, I drove through an area of Dublin I was going to a football match recently, just a few days ago, last Wednesday. I actually couldn't believe it. It's the north side of Dublin, and they were out on the street, they were on the road, they were walking through the traffic to hand 10 packs of heroin to one another. They were shouting and screaming, come on, yeah. And so everybody looks the same, sounds the same, who's in that business, I think, or at least the soldiers on the street that do the business do. And the guards were standing there, looking at them and laughing. It was a very strange experience. And I said, have I missed this? Has this been going on all the time? And it really seems to have gotten much worse. It's interesting that you've noticed that.
Well, I think it is time. I don't mean this because I'm here today, but I do follow not only so much politics, but the police and the politics and the way the country's going. And within the 26 counties, people need to smell the coffee, wake up and smell the coffee. The Garda have seized up until, I think, a few weeks ago, and I have friends high up in the Garda, up until £100 million worth, or euro, I think it was pounds actually, or euros, £100 worth of drugs this year alone. Now they're on target for doubling the seizures of drugs this year, and that's the seizures of drugs. The drugs are up to their eyes. The guards are swimming in. The guards are very, very professional. I tell you, I think they're one of the most, I'm not cynical to me here, they're one of the most professional police forces in the world, and I found it a privilege to work with them. The specialist agencies now, which I worked with, I didn't very work with the uniform guy on the street, very little. The specialist agencies I found some of the best and most highly trained in the world.
Which agency would you have had most contact with here?
Well, mostly the drug squad in the castle, the dedicated drug squad in the castle, and of course they were backed up then by all the specialist surveillance and all the people who had to guard us, weapons people and things like that, and indeed your embassy people, because I worked abroad with you and everything else. When I worked with the guards, I wasn't an RUC man or anything like that. I was under the total control of the Garda. So, the way it would have worked, they would have rang Ronnie Flanagan and said, I need Paddy Craig and a few of his boys or something like that. We were ordered to come down here and report or go wherever, to whatever country it was. And we then were under direct
Give us an
control.
example of an operation that you would have done with the guards, with that sort of background to it.
Well, a lot of them would have been, I suppose, in the end of the day, would have been, I mean, these things didn't happen overnight. We would have been working, say, we were based in Rotterdam. And we spent a lot of time in Amsterdam, but based in Rotterdam, through selling white goods with a wee business from a restaurant there and with lorries and that. We would have got to know a lot of the Irish criminals. They didn't know who we knew who they were, but we would have been in on them in clubs and nightclubs and got to know them and things like that there. And then we would have checked them out and the guards would have said, oh, that's so-and-so on the top, involved in the top gangsters here and that. A lot of them were on the run after Gerry. Real bad boys. And then we would have gotten, the whole idea, we would have got involved in the conduit of and they would have approached us. Normally, they would have approached us to move consignments of drugs. And we often didn't know until the last minute because they went to extraordinary lengths to move them. Sometimes we found ourselves moving through 3 countries. Sometimes we'd only have moved them from Holland to Spain. Or sometimes we'd only moved them to Holland, to England. And on some occasions, they would have tried to change the driver because but don't forget, apart from our undercover operations, the Garda themselves and the customs and everywhere else, they were still hitting these people and taking loads out. So they sometimes just didn't know where we were coming from. But behind the scenes, we had infiltrated them. So we would have said, there's a big lorry coming, it looks like they're going to bring it in through Cork, they're going to bring it in to Dublin or whatever. And immediately then we knew where it was going from. It would have become a guard operation. Or, it would become a Scotland Yard operation if we'd have found out, because the Irish were, that's what I'm saying, they worked through Liverpool and everything else. Would have had to find where the destination of the drugs was. Once the destination where the drugs was, it really became their, it's your job, really, these drugs are going into your people. We would have then decided whether to take it out in Holland, whether to take it out in England somewhere, or in the north, or in the south. And you just had to go with what was really safe for us, or safe for some of the people. Some of the times we had infiltrated them, sometimes we had put people in, sometimes were in at different levels of the chain, and we're following it conventionally.
What I can't understand, but I can sort of understand it, is that once you get involved in this kind of work and once you're making these sort of contacts, particularly once, you turn these guys over, does the word not go out? That bastard Paddy Craig now, and there's another couple of fellas, and we've pictures of them here and there, and put them on every gangster's toilet so that he remembers it. I mean, how do you stop being recognised?
Well, you don't. I mean, that's part of the game. You don't go in against the same guy. You see, that's why I think, I mean, one hit and that's it. It's over, isn't it? No.
Can you go back?
We actually took one guy. I mean, we sat and laughed at it afterwards. We took one guy out 3 times, and I didn't realise it was us. We took him out 3 times. There's loads out. I'm talking about massive loads coming into Ireland. But that's why I'm saying that really.
And he didn't realise that you were turning them over.
He didn't realise.
And you were still doing. Geez, I don't know what happened to the drugs there. That's dreadful.
Yeah, but the way we were doing it, we were taking it out different places.
Yeah. And he didn't realise that the people he was in business with, were turning them over.
Yeah, because I mean, we just didn't take it when he popped up the first time with the drugs. We just didn't nab him and say, "You're fair cop."
Yeah.
We would have followed it for months.
And disappeared, I presume, at the appropriate moment.
Yeah,
I presume you don't suddenly take out your badge and go, "Oi, Sean, by the way, we're working for CID."
We weren't always there when it was taken out.
That's what I mean, yeah.
You know, we maybe brought it from Holland to England.
And alerted your colleagues.
Yeah, and then maybe they brought in their drivers.
Yeah.
Or maybe we handed over to another undercover driver. These people went to extraordinary lengths because they were getting taken out.
I also presume that the kind of person that gets involved in that business, whether they're paramilitary, linked to paramilitary, or just pure gangsters, they when they get annoyed, they don't have a debate with you. They kill you.
Oh, they're very dangerous people, yeah. I mean, the part of is having a good backup team. And running, I mean, as I'm saying, when I was on a job, my backup team could have been 50 to 60. Between the surveillance teams and the armed backup teams, and everybody had a particular job to make an intervention if necessary. If I would,
that's what I was about to ask. Did you have a kind of broken arrow call sign? Was there was there something where you would say, you know, I don't know what it would be in Ireland? It wouldn't be broken arrow. It'd be I'm bollocksed.
Normally, when you went out the window. Well, normally these things would be live, but you always tried to...
And how quick would the backup arrive? I mean, that's something I'd be very interested in if I'd been in your position.
On paper, they would say we could be there within 5 minutes. Okay. Say, I mean, that job, one of the big jobs in England we're talking about, with the Irish sort of dealer boy, he... it was all right saying we'd be there in 5 minutes. As soon as I was in on the job,
so you'd gone dead in 5 minutes.
No, but I knew they wouldn't have got in 15, 20 minutes.
No, they wouldn't be able to get over the gates.
Or past the dogs. They'd had to shoot the dogs.
Yeah.
They'd had to cut the electric railings off. They'd had to scale the gates. I mean, I'd have been dead. So therefore, I mean, you try not to think about things like that. But so,
did that ever happen? Did it ever get to a point where the guys twigged what was going on? Where you had to call somebody in?
Well, no. Well, once we were, if it hadn't been for a friend in the Garda, and I can't say how he knew, but one can read between the lines. If it hadn't been for a friend in the Garda, we were minutes from death in Holland, and I was actually en route with other people. I was actually in charge of that job, and our team, we were moving in to move a massive consignment of drugs, when I got a phone call from my friend in the Garda who asked, was it me? Yes, Paddy. He says, Paddy, is that you in such and such a place? And I said, well, why? What do you want? He says, do not go. Just pull back. Don't go there. Don't go there. Don't go there. And when I spoke to him, they were waiting to kill us. So, in reality, it wasn't very dramatic, but it was real. And he knew.
It's dramatic enough for me.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the reasons.
Anything that involves physical harm or killing is dramatic enough for me. Now, whatever about your friends, and even your friends can be a bit of a problem in, you know, if you can't say, well, you know, when I'm involved in CID and we're on an undercover drugs operation, or trying to stop a consignment of weapons or something coming in to the INLA or whatever. But now you're married at that stage, right? How do you explain to your missus that you're off selling washing machines in Holland?
Well, I didn't. She knew it was in covert operations. So my friends, I mean, I carried 3 mobile phones, maybe 4 mobile phones, maybe 4 pagers. I mean, I was in like a bag.
Yeah.
And had all these different identities. And I mean, I'd have been out for a meal, or sometimes in the middle of my Christmas dinner when 2 of the phones were enough. You had to go into the back room and start taping and talking to these people, because you were in constant. I mean, you had different identities. You just didn't ring them once a month. Some of these people I was very friendly with. Some of these people I spent a lot of time with. I spent a lot of time with these criminals and stroke terrorists than I did with my family, which had its.
And your wife knew what you were doing, did she?
No, she didn't know. And I was part.
But did she not say, what the hell are you? Look, you've been away for 6 weeks now. What's all this about?
Well, she did wear solicitors because she was divorced. So, in the end of the day, you know, well, that and perhaps other reasons, but I mean, it was part of the reasons because we grew apart. And I have to accept. There's maybe other reasons for that, but I have to accept the lion's share of that, you know. And my kids, I mean, my kids have grown up through all the trouble, and my kids suffered.
Do they know?
But they accepted it. Don't forget that my son, from 2 years of old, I used to go out and have to check the car. I mean, I lived in a bulletproof house with electric gates and things like that, and I go out and check the car, and check underneath the car, still do, and check all around the car. Well, when my son was 2 years of age, Paddy, he did the same thing. I didn't know what he was doing, but he used to go out and look underneath the car and go around and feel all the arches and the things like that when he was 2 years of age. And that's the way he was. The children, but all the security forces, not just my child wasn't, but all the security forces children were like that. But mine then, I really had a bigger dad because my kids didn't see me then. I was away I was away for weeks. And I come back, and then when I come back...
That must have destroyed your family life.
Well, it did. Yeah. I mean, it did. In hindsight, you don't think it at the time, you see, but don't forget, I was an adrenaline junkie, living on the edge. And it was just part of the problems too that, I mean, in England now, there was all these things in hindsight. On the mainland, I keep going back to England, on the mainland there, a wee bit more advanced and looking after you and things like that there. Here we got no care. All we got was lip service, keep yourself right attitude. But in England, an undercover officer has to be, say, a psychiatrist every month to talk things through. Because we were living on the edge, dealing with people, seeing things, working on things, and working sometimes with your life. And you don't look on it at the time as that, but your life really in danger. I mean, I was kidnapped once, taken away, and you those things eventually get to you in the middle of the night. Sometimes, as you don't, blasé, but they have your mentally they do affect you, and be part of the problem. I wouldn't see it that way, but other people, perhaps experts, would say, you need to go and calm down.
Did you ever get close to cracking up, do you think?
Well, there was times that perhaps, as well as I suppose all Irishmen do, you turn to drink. Never drugs, but you would turn to drink and maybe drink too much, drink to excess, or you're saying the family. When I would come home, I would maybe want to spend my time with my family. I would want to maybe go and drink in some of these pubs that I was using as a backstop, but drinking with some of these lowlifes, so I'd spend my time drinking with lowlifes instead of drinking with my family. And then you go back.
So you were really addicted to it, weren't you?
Yeah, well, it became part of your life. It came to take you over, and people say, "Well, you do it all again." We've had a highlight, and I have the good things is I have taken, and I don't mean this in a big way, and assisted by and have worked with, we have taken millions and millions and tons of filth off the street. When you see the children, it's the children of Ireland, and I really do, I mean this genuinely. I think, the people, there's a young man killed last night, and you don't want to go into that, obviously, but they say that the Garda are saying it's maybe gang or drug, it was gang related, it's drug related, you were assured by that. And I mean, there's far too many people. I mean, Dublin's like a Wild West now. I tell you now, you'd be better coming up and living in Belfast because it's peace, love and prosperity. I mean, Dublin, you can't go out and get shot. And they're young people, and they're people's children. And they're shooting up. I mean, you're telling me you're shooting up in the streets?
Well, what the extraordinary thing about the guy that you just obliquely referred to there, this fella Freddie Thompson, well, every day we pick up a paper now and we watch Freddie Thompson's story unfolding.
Yeah.
On the news and in the papers. Freddie Thompson's called the guards 15 times last night because he's afraid for his life. Freddie Thompson had to run out of the house last night because a fella tried to come in and shoot him. 3 fellas that he had an argument with earlier on. He's terrified for his life. He's in the middle of a... We're actually seeing this on... It's like watching a reality television show.
But nobody seems to realise that it's happening in their own city, in their own streets, And
it spills out in those communities. His problem spills out to the people next door, the people down the street. And as you know, in 1 or 2 cities, we now have a situation where the bad guys are as tooled up as the good guys, driving around with bulletproof jackets and machine guns, rocket launchers, hand grenades.
Well, when I did the undercover work at the start, I mean, there was very rarely you would have actually had firearms on the plot. And one of the reasons why I left it was, apart from I was at it too long, as you said, you've got to cut your cloth accordingly, was that every single job nearly that I was doing, most of them abroad, most of them started abroad but were heading towards Ireland, in the drugs were pistols, machine guns, hand grenades. And they weren't, now some of them may have been, there was no point saying blaming the poor old terrorists and everything, it wasn't the terrorists, it was criminals.
Yeah.
And then they were selling these guns, but the chances of being shot and these guys high and God knows what, and their guns was on, what we would call it on the plot. There was guns on the plot all the time. Now, if they had guns on the plot, we had to have guns on the plot. We were in the middle. We weren't carrying guns. So you were ducking and diving everywhere with these guys out of their 3 with guns, and I just said to myself, I've made it this far to see you,
You give a fella 20 lines of cocaine and a machine gun, and you're in trouble.
Oh, aye.
2FM. Paddy Craig in the studio, and Paddy, is the author of Undercover Cop, published by Gilla Macmillan, telling his story of his time as an undercover officer working throughout Ireland, North and South, the UK and continental Europe. We've been talking about the hugely significant role that drugs plays in the criminal world nowadays. I mean, and I think you're correct in observing that it is, drugs is probably the single big commodity and the most dangerous issue. It is the one that seems to have drugs, seems to have guns associated with it, and huge levels of violence. And also, you're now dealing with criminals who aren't... It's not even like dealing with a terrorist who has maybe a very powerful political ambition and will do anything to get it and see it through. But you're now dealing with a guy who's bonkers.
Yeah, they're bonkers, and then
and you are dealing with people like that.
Yes, and they're usually working maybe for 3 or 4 security establishments. You see, the thing about drugs is, if you even watch the American movies, and they're true in ways that once they're caught, they're squealing each other. Oh yeah, and to get bail and what have you. So you'd find that there maybe were double agents for 3 or 4, and they all work. Most of them are informants themselves, and they're selling each other off. It's a real swamp and cesspit of every type of, from... I always put it down to avarice, the Canterbury Tales. Throughout my book, people would say, throughout my book, I taught me, people would think, has this guy flipped? Avarice, the Canterbury Tales, those people who have read it. I can certainly recommend it, because I have found it throughout my police career that it has guided all people from the filth up, and that's greed, and they're greedy, and they'll do anything for money, including kill you, sell their own family. From a drug addict, we would sell his mother and sell his child to the gangster who never has enough money. They never have enough. And you're saying, have they ever twigged on? We know they have, because sometimes we have ways of listening to them, or we hear what they're saying, we're getting direct feedback from what they're saying. They know there's something wrong with the job. They know the job's not going right, but they're so greedy.
You can't stop.
They can't stop. And then once it's taken out,
Did you find that those who were involved in the trafficking of drugs and all the gun shipments that went with those as well, and do still, did they make more mistakes than the kind of criminals that you'd been dealing with originally?
Oh yeah, well, a lot of them at the top end can be very sophisticated, and it all depends. I keep going back, but that guy that we went back to in the big job in England, where they had the Rottweilers and that guy there, he had very sophisticated scanning equipment. And one of the times I went in, had I normally in a lot
surveillance on the surveyors.
No, looking for bugs. But if I'd had a device planted on my person at all in his house, he would have found it. But he brought it out in a very way. But would you see what I've bought? And then he turned it on all around my private parts and everything else with this big scanner, a very top of the range scanner. And he also had a gun, which my blood turned as well when he brought the scanner out. And all the times they're watching you, these boys is watching your reactions too. If you're sweating or if you're panicking when they're putting the scanner around you and all this. But I was laughing because I knew I hadn't got anything on me, because he was a fool anyway, because we had his whole house bugged from top to bottom.
I didn't know that.
He didn't know that, but we didn't need. That's why I was laughing inwardly. This fool telling me he had the most sophisticated scanning equipment nearly in the world. I said it probably hasn't picked up with the 20 odd bugs in your house. You know what I mean? But that was down to our technical people, or the technical people in the job. And, we were listening to everything 24/7 he was saying in the house. But, they go to extraordinary lengths. Or sometimes, that's what I'm saying to you, sometimes they would take weeks, maybe a month, moving drugs around the country, changing drivers. We would make an intervention at different times. We just couldn't go back. But they would move drugs for maybe a month and a half, around Europe and the UK, changing drivers all the time, changing locations, to try to stop the security services, whatever it was, from whatever country.
Did you ever lose anything big?
We lost a small parcel. It was a lesson for me, not really through an undercover job so much as through a surveillance problem. And we lost a very small parcel on the border. It was one of the most embarrassing embarrassing days of my life.
What happened?
I was with my friends in the Garda, and I was with in there. Obviously, I mean, we just don't jump back and forwards over the border. Yeah, there's certain protocols. They would have come up and we would have met them, and I was sat in their command car and I would give them a feedback from our people heading towards them with the target. So we'd have more or less fed the target into them, and we lost it through complete incompetence of my people. I mean, there was no point in running around looking for it. It was absolute incompetence. We read the thing wrong. We missed the handover. We took a certain thing for granted, and what they actually did was they threw the two identical cars. It was a good one. The two identical cars, and they threw the drugs through the window, and the cars going the other way. We missed it. We chased the wrong car, and it was one of the most important. We actually got that parcel later. Never caught up on it.
What did the guards say to you about that?
Oh, they had a good laugh at me, you know. I said, don't worry, Paddy, don't worry. But in the end of the day, they were having a good laugh, you know, at my expense. But it was one of them things. But we got it, you know. It took us a wee while to get our hands back on it, but we got it back on it.
Now, when you say that there are protocols, obviously, to be observed, I mean, would you always notify the Southern authorities that you were coming over? Because I presume sometimes it would have suited you maybe if nobody, including the guards, knew that you were here.
No, and I don't mean that. I don't mean that for any politically correct way. I'll tell you why. Because our relationship with the unit, and now you're quite right. An awful lot of guards wouldn't have known we're here. But the drug squad, we wouldn't have set foot here
without telling them.
And the reasons for that wasn't really anything to do with politics. It was because we were dependent. We would be dependent. But we wouldn't be doing our own thing anyway within the 26 counties as such. You know what I mean? I mean, if we were passing through on the way to Belfast or, you know, whatever, or bringing drugs in that way, they would have chaperoned us and looked after us anyway. So we were completely dependent on them. One is, you know, we wouldn't have carried guns anyway within the 26 counties. We didn't need to because they always had enough. The Guard always had more than enough to go around. And the radios and anything like that there, I mean, we never used, and that was, well, that might have been for legal reasons, but we didn't need it. But we were dependent completely on the special agencies down here to look after us. And
did they never say, look, Paddy, do you want a gun today? Maybe?
Oh no, but we didn't need one. You know, I mean, guns are. People would say to us, you know, about you see in the TV and there was a thing on the TV there about Undercover Cop or something. Every minute he was blasting away with one of these John Wayne guns that had 40 rounds, and you know, the reality is, you have guns, people get killed, and we were trained not to use guns. And I had to be very careful because I did an interview with a journalist very recently. And I was trying to show him what I meant. Because he said to me, well, why do you not carry guns? I says, I don't need guns. I says, I was trained to
kill you without a gun.
Well, I was trained to... You can't say that. He says, for legal reasons, I was trained to look after myself. And he said to me, what do you mean? And there was a spoon and a latte cup beside me, and I lifted the spoon, and I showed him something. Well, and the next day in the papers was... People were ringing me up saying, my God, Paddy, next time you round to my house and put my cutlery away and all this. And they were calling me spoons and all this carry on. But he had it down that I was going to kill him with a spoon. You know, so therefore the answer is...
Yes, what were you going to do, stir him to death?
Well, the thing is, you don't need guns. And guns are for the movies. And, you know, if statistically, the Garda or any police force in the UK, if you looked at it, I mean, well, the Met have a problem with shooting the wrong people. Anyway, I'm not talking about the Menzies thing. They've always a problem. But I'm talking about most of the other police forces. They haven't used their gun in anger, statistically. So your chances of using a gun are very, very little anyway. And you have to improvise. And of course, a lot of these people would search you anyway. They would find a gun, but what they're looking for is tape recorders, you know. Then people are more afraid of you taping them than they are you shooting them.
2FM. We have the undercover cop, Paddy Craig, in studio. It's not Paddy's real name, but God only knows what his real name is. He has so many of them. How many names have you had, Paddy, would you say?
Oh, well, in this way, we're about 4.
Did you ever mix up your identities? I mean, did you ever, when the fella from the LVF got on, did you ever become the fella from the INLA by mistake?
No, there was a couple of times I got mixed up with the phones. But what I did was I just didn't answer them. I just didn't answer them. I went away and I thought it out. But you can, but it's normally your mind's that focused that there's, you know, it's not a game. You know, it might sound a game, but yeah, it's not a game. You know, it's deadly. You know, especially especially when you're dealing with the level of people you're dealing with. I mean, we weren't dealing with street dealers, and we were dealing with people who would kill you.
Now, the political crimes seem to become intertwined with the sort of stuff that you were chasing as well, and without doubt, some, particularly the more marginalised political paramilitary groups, they frequently end up being at the very heart of some of this, particularly the drug stuff. How constrained were you when it came to the political end of it? I mean, if you got stuck in the middle of something that looked like it was a genuine political crime in the making, somebody who was going to bomb somewhere for political purposes, did you have to back away from that and hand it over?
If for a start, if we were abroad, never mind here, but the problem would be, you just didn't go and work in Holland or anything like that there willy-nilly and run around Holland doing your own thing. Anything, we worked under a magistrate, under controlled by the Dutch special agencies who were licensed by a magistrate, and we just weren't allowed to do our own thing either. We had to work with, we couldn't sort of grab guns and start running around Holland. But if a gun turned up on the plot, as we would say, in the parcel, which it started to frequently do, the whole thing changed, because one is the Dutch Secret Service would become involved. The whole thing would start, you'd go up the scale, the lights would start going towards the red, and back at home then, with the customs, you'd start MI6, MI5, weapons on the move, going into the UK, politics, law, all this carry on.
But that must have then, by the time you get, once you've more than two agencies involved, you're in trouble. I mean, it must have gotten on occasion to the point where you were there, like now 7 or 8 different groups of people have to be told about this. And the more people that know it's not merrier, it means that the fellas who you're chasing are going to find out.
Yeah, but not only that, don't forget that all these people have their own agendas.
Oh, yeah. And some of them may not want the fella to be caught.
Oh, aye, and special branch, our own special branch, and security services would certainly, in occasions, we would have been cutting across their toes. So what we did was we just used to pull out. We just used to pull out of the jobs. If we could. If it wasn't, we had to run with it. But we used to pull out because we knew right well they wouldn't have told us the truth and they would have thwarted you. And you're quite right. It was our lives on the line, And, I mean, really, it says, but particularly special branch, they had their own agenda. And it certainly wasn't the catching drug dealers, If it had meant one of their informants had to be saved, they would have burned us all. We knew that. The difference is if you don't know that. We knew that. We knew the sort of beast they were, and that's why our relationship would have been very strained.
There are a couple of things that you mark as significant moments and things that you'll never forget. For instance, the Clady bomb, checkpoint bombing.
Yeah, well, the only thing remarkable, there's nothing remarkable about a bomb in the north, or in Ireland indeed, but was how we got saved. I mean, my late mother used to say we had a guardian angel. Well, I've been through that. Well, touch wood, so many times so far. I've been very close to death and walked. We were seconds and feet away from that bomb, and it went up and over us. And one can't describe. I've been through quite a lot of bombings, very close to a lot of bombings, but 1,000-pound car bomb or landmine going off beside you within feet of you is quite an experience. And you couldn't describe it to any, but it's like Hell's Gates opening and looking inside it for a second and coming back.
And how were you saved?
It was a bank. And our stupidity probably saved us. We, in the total darkness, and we'd lost where we really were, and we were on top of a bank, and the bomb was right below us. And when the bomb detonated, the bomb come up and right over us. I was standing looking at the two guys were getting out of the car beside me, and I could see their faces. These things happen in split seconds, but I could see their faces and contorting, and what it was the air being sucked out of their lungs. So I could see their faces all swimming up like a cartoon. Mine was the same, but it was the air being sucked out as the bomb detonated. And then the almighty thunder and the orange, it was just like hell opening. And then I seen the blood coming down our noses and out our ears and that, from the blast. But we were saved. And those things. I always think I have maybe I'll be proved wrong, but I always think I'm a guardian angel.
The bogeymen with the guardian angels. You now are away from the business. You still have protection.
Yes.
Will it be like that forever?
Well, one doesn't want to sort of sound. I'll always be looking over my shoulder. I've made an awful lot of enemies. Not so much, the terrorists, in all my years.
Well, I presume they're the one group who could actually draw a line in the sand.
Well, they have.
Say, look,
but they have.
We're not interested in you anymore.
Some people always have a chip. No.
Yeah.
The war was fought, and in the end of the day, we've got, I can't pursue people either, that I know have done murders and walk up and on the street. And at the end of the day, I was standing in a bar a few weeks ago in Belfast, and a guy come up, a wee guy, I suppose, a bit like me, starting to push on a bit, and he was very dapperly dressed with a hanky and a tie and all, and he said, he kept poking me in the back. And I said, I'm going to hit this guy. He says, do you not know me? And I says, I'm sorry, friend, I don't know you. You interviewed me 15 years ago. And it was about an anti-terrorist job, obviously a terrorist. And I says, well, I'm sorry about that, how are you doing? And I said, I just want to tell you, no hard feelings, do you want a pint? And I said, I'm certain. And he says, after a while, I laughed because he came back over to me and I said, oh my God, he's going to start, there's going to be a fight here. So he came back over to me with another pint. And he says, I just want to tell you, he says, I didn't do it anyway. And I thought, and that was, and that is the way. I don't really worry so much about that. But from the undercover point of view, there's a lot of people, that I have ruined. And there's a lot of people, of course.
I presume they're not all going to be in jail forever, and they're not all dead.
No, they're not. Well, nobody's in jail forever. That's an unfortunate part. Some people now, you think they're going away forever, and next time you meet them 3 weeks later and they're walking down, they've got bail for the most horrendous things. Never mind drugs. But that's life, and you've got to live with that. But I'm not afraid of them. And I'm not afraid of them. They should be afraid of me anyway. I'm not afraid of them. You just have to look after your back, because it'll never be the brave man kill you. It'll be the card,
It's been a pleasure speaking to you. Good luck with the book, Undercover Cop by Gillian Macmillan. Paddy Craig, good morning and go safely.
Thank you.